recording, yeah?
It is now.
Right. Oh, another person in the background. All right. Trying to get my camera to focus now. Of course, it doesn't want to. If you are here, welcome. Just bear with me. I'm just trying to. Maybe it's just not clear on my end for the internet. All right. Well, I want to welcome everyone to this once in a lifetime me monologuing podcast. The reason I am doing this, I will get to who I am and the origin story in a second. I don't ever normally talk on a podcast on my own. I've done almost 1,000 interviews now, and every single one is with a guest. However, when it comes to the topic of the 2472, I have had so many questions, and they're the same questions over and over again, which is amazing. I think I love the fact that I'm getting all these questions, but obviously the solution is to create a video like this and an audio like this. So I will kind of lead everyone through the questions that I hear over and over again. I invite you to ask questions if you would like to. And then hopefully then this will be a living document for you, because as you will hear when they say, where's the research, where's the data, there's a good reason why you can't find it. So I wanted to create it. I wanted to have a way of answering all these questions so that when it's your union, your administration, or your city, or your county, or your husband or your wife, whoever it is, that you can just show them this, and it will give them all the solutions. So I am going to get to these questions I'm about to say now. So I'm going to kind of follow a structure just to keep it flowing. But some of the biggest questions I get is, how can our department even afford X amount more firefighters? We will get to that. And the money is already there. This is why this is so crazy the way we're doing it at the moment. The money is literally there. We're already short-staffed. How can we hire extra people? We can't even fill the holes now. We will get to that too. Again, there is a solution that has actually been shown to be true by some of the local departments here that have recently moved to this shift schedule. We're going to have to take a pay cut. Another fairy tale? No, and we'll explain why. I'm not going to go any of these yet, but just to let you know they are coming. Where is the data? Where are the studies? Another, it's a great question, but I can tell you where you will find absolutely comparable studies, but I will also show you where there's such a lack of research in our profession, specifically in this area. So starting with an introduction, who am I? I am literally a normal firefighter, and this is why I do what I do. I wasn't at the World Trade Center or the Grenfell fire in London or 9/11 or 7/7. I am the other 99.9% of firefighters that day in, day out ran to normal calls, some absolutely horrendous, some completely benign, and it's the death by 1,000 cuts. I originally came from England, as you can probably tell from the accent, and became a firefighter 20 years ago. So I entered the fire service in 2004, and back then everyone was testing, and we'll get into that, the stark contrast between 04 and 24 as far as hiring. But I had a very gypsy career in the fire service. Following my son's mother, she was pursuing fame, which took me, I trained in Orlando, took me down to Miami for Hialeah Fire, over to Anaheim Fire, California for a few years as a tillerman. Loved that job. Then came back because of my little boy, and then spent the last 10 years in the kind of Orlando area in a couple of departments. But what it did is it gave me a very unique perspective of the fire service. And in that group, I would argue, one of the best fire departments on the planet. And in that group is probably one the opposite side. Some extremely affluent departments and extremely poor departments, East Coast and West Coast. So you got to see the commonalities, as well as the differences. A side note, I also am a sports science grad from the UK, and then a sports science bachelor graduate here in UF in Florida. Exercise physiology, excuse me. I've been a lifelong athlete and a coach for most of my life as well. So expert in absolutely nothing, but, I've got a solid health background. And the origin story of the podcast was 10 years ago, 10 years into my career. I just started going to funerals, and they weren't dying of everything. They weren't dying of one thing. They were dying of everything. So, it was the heart attacks and the cancers and the strokes and the suicides and the overdoses and the autoimmune diseases. And friend after friend after friend, was last call bells and bagpipes. And it broke my heart. And I realized that the fire service were very reactive, and we're extremely good at that. You can be in a dead sleep, push 3 numbers on a phone, and we jump up, slide down a pole, and go mitigate whatever your disaster is. But we're not proactive. We're not designed to be proactive. And when it came to the firefighter health element, I realized that that was actually detrimental, because we kept doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results, i.e. insanity. And so with this wellness, exercise physiology, health background, I was looking for a podcast, to listen to. And I'd listened to Barbell Shrugged, and there was a Navy SEAL, Dr. Kirk Parsley. So he was a pre 9/11 SEAL, went to med school, went back to the West Coast teams as their physician. And very long story short, within about a year or so of all these insane blood works of these uber athletes, that their blood work made them look like they were an 80-year-old woman, he realized that it was sleep deprivation that was really destroying his, tactical athletes. And he got with his command. He changed the way they trained, a lot less, night ops, a lot more rest and recovery. And he was able to completely reverse all the testosterone, drops and the cortisol peaks, and get them back to where they needed to be. Well, I'm listening to this 10 years ago, 9 years ago, going, well, why are we not talking about this in the fire service? So I couldn't find a firefighter health podcast back then. And so I was like, okay, well, then there's my sign. So 8 years ago, Behind the Shield was born. It's a completely free podcast. Everything on there is open source library. There's no Patreon, there's no VIP, nothing. I just want to bring the greatest minds of wellness to you, the first responders, military, medical professionals, and everyone else. So that's who I am. I'm no one, I'm just another firefighter. I'm no one special, but I'm someone who's so sick and tired of burying people. So I want to start with the shift myths, because I think this is one of the reasons I'm going to be fair to all of us, whether you're a firefighter, whether you're, a chief, whether you're a city administrator. We have all told ourselves fairy tales for a long time. From my level, I never promoted as a firefighter the whole time, and I absolutely loved it, and a paramedic as well. We have walked around beating our chest, telling the public that we have the most amazing schedule, that we only work 10 days a month. I work 1 day on, 2 days off. And most of my career, I worked, 56, no Kelly. So at that level, I'm going to explain why we're so wrong. So my camera looks blurry. I hope it's actually not. I'm just going to point this not towards my groin, but to these. Okay, so you've got 10 shifts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we say we work 10 days a month. Oh, as I completely messed this camera up. There we go. Put that back. All right. So here's one of your shifts. What no one talks to us about is that 24-hour period consists of 3 8-hour days. So that's not 1 day. That's 3 days. The average civilian workday is a 9-hour day with a 1-hour lunch. So we have been kind of telling ourselves this fairy tale that we work 1 day on, 2 days off. And we don't. We work 3 days on, 1 day off, because the second of those 3 days, you work from midnight to 8 a.m. shift change. So that's already a day you've worked. So you've only got that third day, which, as most of us know, you're ramping up towards getting all your stuff ready to get up at 5, which I used to do, and then drive all the way to the station again. So that doesn't make it 10 days a month. It makes it 30 days a month. Now, what's interesting, as I've heard a few times, and I disagree with this completely, but people will say, well, the fire service is like a business. Well, if it is like a business, then why are we working our firefighters like an Indonesian sweatshop instead of the progressive leaders in the corporate space? If you look at Google and Virgin and all these, good, extremely successful corporations, they're now going down to a 4-day work week. That's 32-hour civilian work week. And finding productivity is just as good. There's a lot more innovation. And the happiness and camaraderie of their employees has gone through the roof. So we are turning our backs on all of these signs of what's wrong. Now, in the upper levels, then they just sit around, they sleep, don't rest in the lazy boy, all that stuff. This is kind of what you start hearing from the chief level, and the reality is, if you actually spend time in the stations, a lot of us are working all day, and some stations most of the night, if not all the night. Is there times, are there times where we sleep? Yes, but is that a good quality sleep? Absolutely not. And I've had numerous sleep experts. I'm going to give you a whole load of episode titles so you can look it up. But I always tell people, if you imagine going to bed and someone's got those big cymbals from the orchestra and they stand over your bed and they say, I may or may not smash these in your ear at some point tonight, maybe multiple times, how well are you going to sleep? We physically cannot get into a deep restorative sleep in a fire station, which it doesn't matter if we are physically up or not. It's disturbed sleep. It's, interrupted sleep. So then when it comes to the city and or the public, we as a profession have done a horrible job of branding, of showing them what we actually do. And it is insane that people still say, why is there a fire engine on my medical call when we've been doing EMS for 50 years now? They still think that we sit around and we play cards and we work out and that's it. And I think what's really does a disservice is people say, oh yeah, but what about those, we got a station where there only one call a shift or one call every couple of shifts. All right, well, good. But I'm concerned about the people that are getting destroyed in all the other busy stations. But for some reason, we focus on that one. Those usually are going to be firefighters that have been in the meat grinder for 20 plus years, who at this point now kind of deserve to be in the quieter station, if we're being completely honest. So dispelling the myths and understanding that every single rung of the ladder, we all have kind of got it wrong, because it was a great system when we were just running fires. But you add in EMS and then the 911 abuse and all the other calls that we respond to now, it's not the fire service of, 40, 50 years ago, but our, shift schedule was never changed. And I think most of the departments I've worked at, their staffing hasn't increased for a long, long time. So those are the shift myths that I think it's important for us to understand, because this is why I'm so passionate about it. The very first question needs to be for all of us to look in the mirror and go, why is it that the bank teller stops at 40 hours, but the person who goes, wakes from a deep sleep, goes to the pole, goes down, drives a rig or drives the back of the tiller to a call, pulls ladders, makes entry, does a search, pulls someone out, then is trying to work out cardiac algorithm, drug calculations, that person, it's totally fine for them to be working 56 plus hours a week. And then you add in the mandatory crisis that we have, the recruitment crisis, it's 80 hours a week. And I work mandatory a lot in my career. And this is to, agencies on the other side of the country, a huge amount. And that's an 80-hour week with one mandatory. So that's double that bank teller now. And no one is going to be able to explain that. Can you, if you can justify why we need to be working longer, I'm all ears. But the important thing to underline is, if the way that we did it worked, we wouldn't have this crisis of cancer and heart attacks and suicides and overdoses and divorces. If it worked, I would be wasting my time, because everyone would be happy and everyone would be healthy and be like, James, I don't know what you're talking about. But if you put your hand on your heart, you know damn well that it's not working. If you're in the Northeast and you already work 42 hours a week, that's amazing. And this is what's interesting, is we revere a lot of the Northeastern departments and they work this schedule. But I don't hear voices saying, hey, why is the rest of the country working more? We need to get them to where we are. So this is where this fusion is. So the very first question I'm going to get to is, where is the data? My question to you first would be, will you tell me? Because people ask that when I put this out. Oh, I need to see white papers. I need to see studies. The reason why you're saying that is I know damn well that you can't find it. Because if it was everywhere, you wouldn't say, James, where is the data? The problem is there is so much data. And I did a post the other day. Every health issue that we suffer from, there is a connection between that and sleep deprivation. I have had guests, which I'm going to list in a second, from all branches of the military, from the sporting community, neuroscience, you name it, all talking about sleep. Every one of them agrees irrefutably that the way that we work our firefighters, especially the 56-hour weeks, is insane. And it's completely, it's expected that we have all these issues that we do. So the data exists, but you have to look in the military, you have to look in other areas, but it's human beings in a uniform not sleeping under high stress. It's pretty much apples to apples. The other question I think is more important is, why is there no data? Why, when the word PFAS was mentioned with cancer, everyone was up in arms. And I had Rob Ballot on the show, which I'll get, episode 631. And he was the guy that really blew the door open on PFAS, the dark water story. He was the lawyer. And that is absolutely, needs to be part of the conversation. But there was no loud voices on sleep deprivation, a known carcinogen labeled by the WHO. So it's a very kind of pick and choose. Well, I can blame PFAS because I don't have to do anything. I can just point my finger. If I talk about sleep deprivation, I, as a leader, have to actually make changes and go to my city and county and advocate for my people. I think I'm just going to blame PFAS. So the lack of data, I think, really underlines the lack of, of effort that should have been put in by firefighter, organizations, unions, etc. Because we should have a whole load of data now. We lose hundreds of firefighters. And this is what's so sad. If you look at our official statistics, our numbers are, for example, I think it's just sub 100 for suicides. I live in the state of Florida. We have, tens this year already. One state, you know what I mean? There's another 49. So you're telling me that we make up, 30, 40% of those stats? There's no way. So that you've got the underreported statistics, obviously suicide with the stigma. A lot of people don't come out and say that was the case. But our biggest miss, our biggest failure in the fire service is our retirees. Most of these diseases, most of these mental health conditions, most of these addictions really take hold when we're, middle age and beyond. And the VA, even though it's not perfect, counts military members after they have left. We have no VA in police and fire and EMS. When that bay door comes down, we're not counted. So if I drop dead today, I wouldn't be on any firefighter statistic whatsoever. So the reality is that the numbers we're seeing are probably the 10th of the numbers that are actually going on there, because our retirees are silently dying of all these things and no one's counting them. So I guess this whole early bit is, kind of underlining the importance of this conversation. And what's beautiful is, as you were here, it benefits everyone and it saves money as well. So when it comes to the concept of sleep deprivation, if you look at what that is used for as a tool, it is used for special forces selection. And I've got some hilarious stories. I've had so many, special operations members on the show of hallucinations, seeing pirate ships in the middle of the fields and, all kinds of stuff. And this is only, 3-4 days with no sleep. We have the interrogation, whether it's police or whether it's, military, whatever it is. We use sleep deprivation to break someone down to interrogate them. And yet we have our profession that's trying to move to a 48-hour shift, 48-96, which is literally, heading towards that side. Matthew Walker, Why We Sleep, he quotes that one night without sleep is like the same cognitively as the blood alcohol of 0.1. Now, here's what's interesting about that. Most studies that are done, usually they're advertised to the local college kids where that, that lab is, and the kids will take part and they'll do a sleep study and then they'll go back. Now, these kids, they might be partying a little bit, but otherwise they are simply, sleeping every night and studying. So you've got a kid that's gone from probably a pretty decent night's sleep consistently to this one test and then back to, their normal life. Now you take a 20-year firefighter, that's every third day for 20 years. So there's no way in hell it's even close to 0.1. If we don't sleep that night, we're way, way past that. So this is the thing, that no one in the sleep science industry has said anything other than it is insane. So we have to be up at night. I got a kind of rather aggressive message on my Facebook the other day. It's amazing how unprofessional some firefighters can be when you're trying to help them. But anyway, I digress. And he took umbrage to the fact that I was trying to make 10s and 14s a 24. That, as you know, isn't the case. I'm trying to get all the 56 plus hour people down to 42 so that we can save their lives and their marriages. But that being said, if you listen to the sleep people, just as a quick tangent, you will hear that when you go from day to night to day to night, as a lot of these shifts do, that is horrendous for the circadian rhythm because it can't reset. The one good thing about 24 is, even though, yes, we might be getting up, we're not, the nighttime isn't our shift. We're not up the whole time. So we're actually able to regulate better than, the 10s and 14s. And a good example of that would be our police officers, our doctors, our nurses. A lot of them work these shifts are they a pillar of health? A lot of times those professions are struggling immensely. So again, is it working? If it is, and everyone on 10s and 14s is in tip-top shape, then I got nothing else to say. Let's go to 10s and 14s and call it good. I would argue, especially in the fire service, that the 24 is the answer. We have fire stations, make naps essential, understand sleep hygiene on our days off. That is as close to good as we're going to get. We still have to be awake when people are sleeping in their beds. So as far as what does sleep deprivation do? So the acuity side first, let's go to that. When you are not sleeping for 1, 2, 3, 4 days, whatever it ends up being, or disturbed, interrupted sleep, the cognition, as I said, imagine a blood alcohol of 0.1 or way worse. There is a thing called microsleep. And back in the day, we used to have those line of duty deaths all the time, the kind of intersection wrecks, and they still happen, sometimes with 2 of our own vehicles. When you are exhausted, you will take a microsleep. And what's interesting is that someone just told me the other day, on the crash scenes of a drunk driver, there'll be a brake pattern, there'll be skid marks. On the crime scenes, or when they forensically look at the scene of a driver who's fallen asleep, a microsleep, there are no brake patterns. They just plow straight into the person. And this is what happens to us all the time. So you've got the microsleep. So I would argue, of our line of duty deaths, the people that got lost in the fires, the people that fell off the roof or the aerial, the intersection accidents, how many of those were actually partly sleep related? How many of the fatal wrecks of firefighters going home were related to falling asleep at the wheel? Or suicide is the other one. I think there's probably a lot, within that actually were deliberate, and we'll never know. So that's the acuity side, trying to do, like I said, the pediatric drug calculations on, 40 hours into a 48-hour shift. It's dangerous. It's just that simple. If we talk about doing it for them and the highest delivery of service, you cannot do that on 2-3 days of no sleep. That's why with the 24/72, you've got that 72 period after 24, and I'll explain why you wouldn't be mandatory. And then that gets you close to baseline so that you're not adding and adding and adding. Now, equally as scary is the long-term, the chronic effects of sleep deprivation over and over and over again. So I talked about cancer. I mean, the biggest killer outside of suicide, which in itself is just absolutely heartbreaking. But yeah, the WHO is a class 2A carcinogen. So it's a known carcinogen. People are aware of it. And again, a lot of times they're studying shift workers, night, but then go home. They're not being mandatory to stay all day as well in these places. So, every time you look at shift work, we're the extreme example of that. So you've got cancer. So like I said, I'm all for, clean cab or a version of. Absolutely, if we discover a PFAS, and Rob's episode was incredible, we need to get out of our gear if we can. It's in our AFFF, it's in all these things. But if we're not talking about the resilience of the body to fend off cancer, then we're missing a huge part of the puzzle. Same with COVID. A lot of our first responders overworked, underslept, more vulnerable to COVID, and we lost a lot of them. Suicide. So again, and I'm going to give you a load of episodes that you can watch, but when it comes to suicide, you will hear an absolute direct correlation between sleep deprivation and suicide. And is it the only thing? And this is the thing with all these conversations. Are they the only thing? No, but they're the thing that no one's talking about. And they're the biggest of the things. But when the body sleeps, when the brain sleeps, it literally takes a kind of version of a bath. And that's when you process thoughts. You process the learning. So you took a rope class that day. That's why sometimes you can't remember the knots the next day if you didn't sleep. We physically need to sleep to process learning, but also all the thoughts. Discard the things that are kind of, superfluous that you don't need to remember, but also the traumas, to process that, to make it a memory, not something that's still in the front of your mind. So you think about, you saw something horrible and you didn't sleep. Now you've compounded that. So, and then with the lack of sleep, you start to get this breakdown. I want to just take a tangent because I think this is important to say 1,000 times. When I first became a firefighter, it was still that generation of, suicide is cowardly, it's selfish, how could they? Think of your wife, think of your kids. And I think most of us thought that way. It wasn't coming out of a place of meanness. It just didn't make sense to an arguably healthy mind. What I've realized now is when you have the perfect storm of unaddressed childhood trauma can be an absolute superpower if you've been able to work through it. But if it's been buried down, it becomes a fractured foundation. The what we actually see, the side effects of alcohol, maybe psychiatric drugs, relationship issues, financial issues, but then sleep deprivation. You've got all the pieces of the puzzle that literally miswires the brain. And I have, of the 1,000 guests, probably, I'm not exaggerating, 400 of them had suicide ideation. Some of them went through with it and survived, jumped off the Golden Gate Bridge, shot themselves. And then a lot of them were right there and something saved them, a phone call, a dog, whatever it was. But here's what's so important to put compassion in the suicide conversation is pretty much all, I'm talking like 99% of them said, I felt like I was a burden to my wife. I felt like I was a burden to my children, my husband, my friends. And that miswiring causes that shame and that guilt to amplify. And they truly believe that they are the reason for their loved one's pain. And so you take someone who's already taken an oath that they will die for complete strangers. And now they think that their beloved wife and their 2 girls are hurting because of them. That makes, at that point in that broken, miswired brain, and I say broken with compassion, not judgment, that makes that a selfless and courageous act. It's not right because their brain is lying to them, but their reality is so strong. And there's no better example than those 2 young police officers we lost. I think it was late last year. They were both, I think, in their 20s. They had a newborn child. The husband or boyfriend killed himself, and I think a week later the girlfriend did. And they left behind an infant. But at that point, they were probably going through the same thing. So when you add sleep deprivation, you add so much more weight to that person getting to that miswired brain. So this is a tangent, but I think it needs to be said. If you are feeling like you are a burden to the people you love, or you hear someone else talk about that, that is the biggest red flag that we should be waving when it comes to mental health. So a little tangent from the 2472, but I think that needs to be said. Addiction, the real stigma when it comes to mental health in the fire service. When it comes to suicide, we've kind of accepted that in some way, some conversations, but addiction to opiates, I've lost one firefighter I got hired with in my last department, and then several firefighters locally I know to opioid overdose, several. And then you've got obviously the alcoholism, whether it ends up in a car crash, whether it's, cirrhosis of the liver. These are all part of the same thing. There's a void. They need to fill the pain, insert whatever coping mechanism it is. But that addiction, again, amplified by sleep deprivation. Obesity, we talk about this, and I'm very deliberate when I talk about fitness standards in the fire service. I don't know if you can see, but I'm, in reasonably good shape. I still hold my own in the gym. I did the CPAT not too long ago, definitely held my own there. Not a big deal, but I believe that fitness standards should be where they should be in the fire service. They should be high. What we are required to do in a worst case, a high-rise strip alone is 100 pounds before you climb 10, 20, 30 stories and then go to work. That being said, though, the way that we work our firefighters sets them up for failure. And I have a free class that I do in Ocala. If you're in Ocala, Mondays at 5 p.m. Eastern, Iron Legion, I do it for free. All first responders, military, it's a free class for you. But I hardly get anyone. And I don't blame them. At the moment, our local firefighters are so overworked and exhausted, they just want to go home. And I understand it. So this is the kind of juxtaposition, is we should have a standard here, but we can't expect that standard to be met when our environment is down here. Now, you go to a 2472, over time, not being unfair, you can demand that your new recruits and then your staff get back to where they want to be. No one wants to be down here. And anyone that says they do is lying. So this is the thing. So the obesity thing, sleep deprivation, massive. Testosterone. The testosterone crisis is another kind of elephant in the room. There are so many young firefighters, because I coach at Iron Legion, and some of our original kind of members became firefighters, and I've watched them go, some of them almost 10 years now in the fire service, and I've watched the breakdown. And these are young guys, like either side of 30, with a testosterone of like 250, and that is completely reversible with more sleep, which is why we go back to Kirk, Parsley. Now, there are exceptions to the rule, extreme age, TBIs, some of those things can actually stop the body making it. But as another side note, what I'm also seeing is a predatory element when it comes to exogenous testosterone. There are men's clinics popping up everywhere. It used to be that you go to your doctor and the scale was, I forget now, like 250 to 950. And, you'd be 252. You go, oh, you're within normal limits. You're good. And you're a 28-year-old tactical athlete. No, you're not good. You should be probably in the 700s. So you wouldn't get anything. Now it's swung the other way where, I've got a good friend of mine that was given TRT. They never even did a blood test. So there's a thing called peptides now, and there's a great company that I use personally. So every sponsor I have on the show is there because I have hunted them down after I've loved their product. So I take what's called peptides, and all they do is they just boost the body's natural testosterone production. If you take TRT and they're not warning you that it can cause male pattern, balding, sterility, literally atrophy of the testes because your body thinks it's got so much it doesn't need them anymore. I forget the term, but what people affectionately call bitch tits. I mean, that's all a real thing. With the peptides, you can just boost it up. So, ideally you have this great shift schedule, but if you're gonna, if it's gonna take 2 to 3 years to get there, you're in the process, like hopefully Ocala is, then this is a great way of kind of boosting everything up in the meantime. TRT is not the only thing. It's the last resort, because once you take it, you're on it for the rest of your life. And one of my good friends took it, bro science, locker, bodybuilding, testosterone when we were in kind of medic school. And now he's, it destroyed him. He's doing well, but it had such a negative side effect. So just want to put that there. If you're looking for an excellent company for that, Transcend, amazing. But the testosterone thing, again, before you take anything, diet, exercise, time in sunlight, and then, sleep is the most important thing. Without sleep, your hormones are all wrecked. Even the diabetes, if you don't sleep, your blood sugar, your insulin, is off. So any hormone at all is disrupted if we don't sleep, because we regulate when we sleep. Injury. I had Dr. Stuart McGill, known as the back mechanic, amazing guy, revered all over the world for, especially spinal health. Had him on the show and again, explained to him the shifts that we work. And he said, James, it's not will you get hurt, it's when you get hurt. Because any of us that take our job seriously, that will be out the back pulling hose, throwing ladders, and then we do a workout. If you're not sleeping, the muscles, the connective tissue, they're not repairing. So you're breaking it down to build it up, but you're not getting the build it up, which is why they say it's always the fit guys that get hurt. It is. And it's a shame because they're doing everything right, but they're kind of being punished for it by not getting the rest and recovery. So all the musculoskeletal injuries that you have, and we was, it's because I step off the rig funny. No, it's probably because you haven't slept for 20 years and your knee finally gave in. And I've got meniscus tears on both of my knees, and I rehabbed a back injury with foundation training, no surgery, no meds. Look up foundation training, phenomenal. And then the last one, well, two things. Reproductive health. And I think this is the one that really lends weight to this argument. People have said to me, I'm going to lose my overtime, and other kind of things that are very self-serving. I had Dr. Sarah Jenke on 3 times. The most recent one we did, we just focused on this topic. And this is going back to where's the data. We interviewed her 5 years ago, and when I talked about sleep deprivation, and she talked about this, so she knows I'm saying this. I remember her looking confused and almost like a kind of dismissive, well, that's not anything. And then that was 5 years ago. This last one, she said, when I actually dove into the sleep deprivation, the medicine, the science behind it, she was blown away how it was behind everything. But where she has done some incredible research is the impact of what we do and the sleep deprivation shift work on our children, on our reproductive health. And I know there's a huge amount of, first responder families that struggle to get pregnant, or, they lose a child X amount of time through the pregnancy. There seems to be a higher level of autism, and Down syndrome. So imagine this, if even though you're concerned about your last 5 and your drop and your pension check, think about the impact that this is going to have on your children. That in itself should be enough to really, pick up a torch and want to be part of this fight. Even if, you've had kids and, it's what's happened. The fact that our actions can affect our children, the pediatric cancers that we see, all these other heartbreaking things. If we can stop one parent from going through that, one child, by making this change, then this fight is worth it. And then lastly, another one that I'm seeing an insane amount recently is strokes. I mean, I've got multiple firefighter friends that had strokes. And again, if you look at the research, sleep deprivations and strokes, there's an absolute correlation. So when people say, show me the research, don't type in 2472, because I'll be really freaking blunt right now. If you need a study to show you that a 42-hour work week is healthier than a 56-hour work week, should you be wearing a badge? You know what I mean? You don't need a study for that. Do you need a study to find out if you step in front of a London bus, it's going to hurt? No, it's common sense. So we don't need studies for that, but we do need to learn about the sleep deprivation. So if you put in any of these things that I've talked about with the words shift work, you will see all these studies come up. So there's your data. All right. I'm just going to reel off a few of the resources for you on all that stuff I've talked about, and then we're going to get to the recruitment crisis, and then how do we afford to make this change. So Dr. Sarah Jenke, The Science, the Data, episode 928. Professor Russell Foster, when you hear Andrew Huberman and some of these other people talking about when you wake up, go outside, get daylight on your eyes, I've never heard Russell credited for this, sadly, but he was the man who discovered the chronoreceptor in the eye. So before it was rods and cones, that's all we were taught. And the the eye people, I can't say that word properly, ridiculed him, laughed him out, saying, there's just rods and cones. What are you talking about? And then he proved it. And what's interesting is even with some of our veterans that lost their sight through IEDs and things, if their eye was still intact, they actually were still able to tell day and night. If the eye was completely removed or the retina was completely damaged, then as he talked about, he'd have soldiers that say that their neighbors hated them because they would be mowing the grass at 3 a.m. They didn't realize what time it was. So Russell is like one of the real grandfathers when it comes to that and sleep as well. So he is episode 647. Amazing man. 3 of my military guests. Actually, more than that. They're all okay. So Allison Brager, Army sleep specialist, episode 117. Rachel Markwald, episode 196. She's the Navy's sleep specialist. Those two ladies are coming on together in a few weeks, and we're going to hit this again with the shifts. Dr. Kirk Parsley's been multiple times, but episode 6 was the first one. Literally one of the first person I heard about sleep deprivation, and is so worth listening to. Dr. John Cordle, Navy captain. He was beating the drum about sleep. No one was listening. They had that horrendous, fatal battleship crash where multiple sailors died. All of a sudden, the Navy started paying attention. I don't know why we have to wait for people to die. I was actually, this takes me to a good tangent. I was looking back because I was thinking, okay, what's a good analogy for this? Being British, back in the Victorian times, the Industrial Revolution, we had children cleaning chimneys. We had children working in factories. And I did some Googling. I'm like, well, let me see what numbers are, because back then there were no white papers or peer-reviewed studies, so let's just see what was actually happening, that people didn't need that kind of data to make a change. And 30,000 children died each year, and 500,000 were maimed. So what happened? Someone said, people are dying, we need to change things. They didn't ask for studies. They didn't, say, show me the data. They just realized that something was happening where families were devastated because they were losing children. And it's no different in the fire service. We are losing so many people, and I'm getting, but show me the data. That is your data. And in 1833, the Factory Act was passed, where children weren't in chimneys and factories anymore. It's common sense now, looking back at it, as will the kids that work and become firefighters 20 years from now. They'll look back and go, I can't believe they used to do that. So again, when it comes to, do you wait for everything to collapse, or do you be a thought leader and progressively and proactively fix your profession? So that's John Cordle. Lieutenant Colonel Janelle McCauley, she's Air Force. Same thing, human performance, sleep, episode 175. And these are all earlier ones. This is how long I've been talking about. I've been talking about 2472s for 8 years on this podcast. And then Dr. Stuart McGill, the back mechanic, was episode 95. All right, so now let's get to how do we actually make this happen. So firstly, how are we finding the people? There's a recruitment crisis. We can't even hire people now. I literally had an interesting conversation with one of the Ocala firefighters. I just bumped him to the store today, and I was telling him that one of his peers, one of the other firefighters, had messaged me on social media. Gainesville Fire, for any of you that have been, following, Gainesville Fire Rescue just went to a 24/72. Literally, I think it was this Monday. Yeah, this last Monday. They, from what I understand, had 300 applicants for their fire department for, I think it's only a few spots. City of Ocala, from what I understand, secondhand information, had 5 applicants for their spots. So this is the problem, is right now we have a group of very intelligent, young potential recruits. And I have to give a huge shout out. In where I live, Chris Hickman started a thing called the mentorship program, and it's a combined thing with City of Ocala, Marion County. There's a lot of other people that help out with that, and they are doing an amazing job of training young people, removing barriers to entry to get the best of all the different, diverse backgrounds and get them and challenge them to be incredible recruits. And there's scholarships for fire academies, and then, loads of departments waiting to hire at the end. So that was another tangent. But if you want to fix, one of the things to fix recruitment and certainly diversity, because there are groups that just can't afford. My mummy paid for my fire academy, and I wasn't a young man. So I can't imagine being, Oh, I don't know if you lost me for a second. My ugly mug's back now. So anyway, so why is there a recruitment crisis? 20 years ago, when I was testing, I went down to South Florida and I worked for Hialeah, and bless them, they picked me up, but it was extremely competitive. Then a year later, I tested in California. I sat at the actual written with 1,000 candidates going for 30 jobs. And these were, they made it through all the other, the filtering process. And they were firefighter EMTs and or paramedics. Most of them had ambulance operator experience. Most of them had wildland experience. A lot of them went through explorer programs. So I'm not just competing against Joe Blow in the street. These are extremely competitive people that I'm trying to get a job, one of those spots. Fast forward now, 5 people testing for Ocala. Again, if the way we're doing it is working, I have nothing to say, but it's not. So one of the big reasons why we have a recruitment crisis, and I hear people go, oh, it's these Gen Zs, they don't want to work, or, it's the obesity epidemic, which of course is definitely hurting our pool of candidates. But the biggest thing is when I went to become a firefighter and I'm looking, I type in, what's it like to be a firefighter? It's like, oh, James, it's amazing. You get a mustache, you get a leather helmet, ladder 49, cats in trees, fires, Dalmatians. Now, when you Google what's it like to be a firefighter, you get all those things because the job hasn't changed. And this is what's crazy. The job is the same. It's the working conditions that are devolved. But so if I Google it, I also see firefighter cancer, firefighter suicide. I mean, locally here, if you put firefighter in Marion County, the spate of suicides this area has had recently is one of the first things that you'll see. The divorces. I mean, all these things that we talked about. So a young candidate now is like, okay, I've got UPS, I've got, whatever the thing, but I want to serve. But this is a 56-hour work week. I've done my research of that because, Don Campbell was on. He was saying like he had a recruit who had all the departments laid out and stats and everything. It's like, well, these guys get mandatory. That's an 80-hour week. So if you were a young recruit looking at this, how excited would you be? We signed on to do the job. We didn't sign on at 7:30 to be told you can't go home week after week after week. That's not the job. That's mismanagement. So the reason we have a recruitment crisis is we haven't fixed the working conditions. It's that simple. The beautiful thing is we have an opportunity to turn the ship around, to make an absolute difference. Because as I tell people, like genuinely, this isn't being dramatic. At this point, you can either be the union leader, chief, city administrator, whatever, that proactively and progressively save the city a bunch of money, improve the morale and health of the fire service, improve the delivery of service, or you can be the person that was at the helm when your fire department sank. Because if, for example, I'm not picking on Ocala, I just know the stats. If they only have 5, then, that's diminishing. That's a line. And then this is the other important thing. Some people have said to me, oh, we're still able to hire. What kind of person are you hiring? Say, that 1,000 people in Anaheim and there was 30 spots, you're talking about, whatever, 3% or 3%, top 3% is what they took. So, obviously it's not going to be that acute in some places, but arguably you want to be taking the top 25, 30% of a list, in an ideal world. And if you're below that as a candidate, you go, okay, well, I need to get my CPAT higher. I need to study more for the test and be a better candidate next time. But if you're taking everyone, that means you're taking those rock stars at the top and you're taking the opposite side at the bottom. They're all coming, and now they're promoting. Now they're battalion chiefs. You know what I mean? Next thing, you end up with some horrific incident that ends up on national news. Like, how do we get here? You talk about money savings, get a lawsuit. So don't look at the numbers like, oh, we can still fill the spots when you're taking almost everyone. That's a very, very dangerous game to play as well. But if you look at, all the things, like I said, the burnout. So we've got, obviously a recruitment crisis, but we also got a retention crisis. I think law enforcement is worse. But how many people are we losing that, we could have stayed an extra few years, if their health is good and they wanted to, that, that knowledge that we're losing out the back door, they're leaving prematurely. And then the big thing is, this young generation, the Gen Z, they value time with their family. They're not carpenters and mechanics and some of these things that I wasn't. I was a farm boy, but the generation before me, they were builders. They were carpenters. They were tradespeople. Well, now these kids are really great with computers and all kinds of other things, but they grew up in this world of work-life balance and meditation and breath work and ice baths, and they understand health. So when they look at the way we do it now, they're like, that doesn't seem very healthy. All right, so let's get to the money. Hopefully I'm not waffling too much, but I'm trying to make these points because for me, I look at the Behind the Shield podcast as a law, a court case, where I have all these experts and people are like, who are you? Are you an expert? And I've always said, no, I'm not. Even my book, which I'll show at the end, it's not written as an expert. It's not written as, some incredible biography. It's literally written as a normal dude, and it references all the people that have the answers to our problems. So where is the money? So this is, I think, the one that most people, are really interested in. So I was part of a thing, and I'll show you this here, Firefighter Resilience Blue Sky. Here in Marion County, we lost a total of 4 firefighters, 2 within a few weeks of each other, one of whom I'd taught just, I don't think it was days, certainly weeks before, when I did some tactical athlete training at Marion County. And a local business person said, what are we doing here? And there was a great research organization called IHMC, and their satellite office is in Ocala. Their main one is in Pensacola. And they work with the Navy SEALs, with NASA, with DARPA. And DARPA is, you think tier 1 Delta, just come up with any idea and prove that it won't work. That's where you get these crazy innovations from, satellites and all that kind of thing. That's who they work with. Well, they have a thing called Blue Sky. And this businessman in the hospital district funded a study. And we all went to, and I was very fortunate enough to be included as one of the voices. And we went for 2 days and sat in a room and brainstormed, and everyone kind of gave their thoughts, and there were psychologists and neuroscientists and all kinds of people there. And what was interesting is Marion's union president was there, and he said for every recruit they hire, it costs them $18,000. So every time that you hire someone, you train them, and then they walk out the door a year or 2 years later, that's 20 grand that you just lost. So right there, and it's the same with that retiree, that 10, 15, 20-year guy or girl that may have stayed another 5 or 10, they walk out the door, that's another 20 grand that you've got to go through and replace that person with. So that in itself, if you're bleeding people, look at those costs. The biggest one that I was blown away how many people were like, oh, that alone pretty much covered what we needed, was the overtime costs. If you are currently understaffed and you have a vacancy, that means that you are paying someone time and a half to fill that vacancy. And so, I think Marion's, I forget what it was, I don't want to misquote them now, but it was an insane amount of overtime. And some departments I've spoken to, it's literally millions and millions of dollars in overtime alone. A lot of time, if you look at what is needed to make the transition, it's not a full shift. It's not an entire start from zero. I need another entire shift to make a D shift. you've got Kelly days that, you don't have to fill. So you've got X amount part of a shift. You've overhired, so you got a few extra bodies. You gave extra vacation days because your shift is so terrible that you could, negotiate 3 away, and that way you're kind of blunting the amount. But most of people, they only needed to pay for a half to a third of a shift to actually fill that spot. If you've got Kelly days, you've got an overtime spot every single time someone's on a Kelly day. When those go away, that frees up, that overtime money as well. The workman's comp claims. So if you think all the things I've said, everything that we do makes us sick mentally and physically, that all obviously has a downstream effect. All the injuries, the medical retirements, as I said, the workman's comp claims, the insurance premiums being so high because we are always hurt and sick. That is another huge chunk of money that if you proactively invested, you would actually, lower premiums. The workman's comp claims would be, far less. Medical retirements, line of duty deaths. So that's another big chunk. But like I said before, just retaining recruits and your overtime cost alone, if you do a financial overview and people ask me, have you got the numbers? No, you've got the numbers. Each and every one of you has got the access to your own department's personal numbers. They're unique. Other people's numbers are obsolete. Then the biggest one that a lot of people don't think about is lawsuits. I mean, I'll give you an extreme example. How much money do you think that the city of Uvalde is going to have to pay for what happened in that school? Would that have funded extra training, fitness standards, a fitness instructor, whatever it was? I'm not an expert. I'm not Monday morning quarterbacking, but obviously it was a huge, huge error. What is the downstream cost of that instead of proactively fixing whatever issues that they were having? So the lawsuits, the intersection wrecks, the drugs that we push, the wrong drugs, physically being physical with a patient because we're so burnt out and exhausted, and it's the third time we've seen them. And you know what I mean? I know that there's people that come and they're searching for money. That's another one. A healthier, more rested fire department, this is going to happen less. So where is the money? It's downstream. You're wasting it instead of investing it. So it's not about asking for more. Now, budget year, would you have to go to your city or county and say, we need to hire X amount of people? Yes. But if you can then, because you've done the forensics on your finances, say, this is going to affect this, and you're just talking retention and overtime alone, but then every year we're going to keep saving that, that's where your money is. And then as a fire department, think about that. You've gone to your city and said, we have a solution for the recruitment crisis, and we have a way of basically justifying our own pay increases from here on in because we're saving you money. We're making you our pay increases. A big thing I think that people don't think about too, as our level of service is diminishing, no, we're not telling the taxpayer. They're not getting a partial tax refund because now there's only 3 instead of 4 on the engine. And now that closest rescue is 2 districts away because the one that should be covering them is now doing interfacility transports for the hospital. So by fixing this, we can make sure that delivery of service is what the department, what the public is actually paid for and expecting. So there's that as well. Moving on to, will our pay be cut? I get this a lot. You're going to cut the hours, you're going to cut our pay. It's very simple. We don't get hourly rate. We're paid a salary. You can break it down to hour, but like I tell people, okay, now you go to training, 40 hour. Do they cut your pay? No, they adjust your pay, your hourly pay. And that's exactly what would happen. If you have, and this is where the recruitment thing, you fix this now, and this Boynton saw this, Gainesville saw this, Pasco saw this. When you say to the world, we are going to go to a more progressive shift because we care about our firefighters, people start lining up outside your department. And now all those holes that you were plugging have now been filled with recruits. So there isn't that overtime to keep slamming people with. The good thing is, though, when you do get overtime, because it's not going away, like the Gainesville guys are telling me, they have Gator games and, all kinds of stuff where there's lots of, overtime. But again, it's not overnight all the time. Now your hourly rate would actually be higher. Your overtime rate would be higher. So you're not going to lose money. You're actually per hour going to gain money. But this is another kind of urban legend fairy tale that we've been telling ourselves, is why not to put the effort to make the change. All right, losing overtime. I think I touched on this before, but here's the long and the short is, when you became a firefighter, we looked at how much it paid. We didn't say, oh, but I'm going to have all this mandatory or overtime I'm going to work, and this is actually my salary. So talking of the firefighter ownership, it's on us if we can or can't afford our lifestyle. But that being said, are there times where we need to supplement our income? Absolutely. But is it healthier to do it in a different capacity rather than work yet another 24 and be away from our family for another entire day and be even more exhausted and more likely to get burnt out? No, it doesn't make any sense. So I don't want to lose my overtime as an absolute BS, reason why we do this, because, like, as I said, it's not about you, it's about them. That being said, though, there is such a healthy alternative to this. I don't think I know a firefighter who hasn't got a side hustle, who isn't an innovator in some other way, who didn't have a trade before. You could hang drywall, all day. You could install cabinets, you could teach piano, you could, personal train, whatever it is, but you're going to be in your own bed that night. So you're still able to make money, but you go home to your family, you sleep next to your partner, and you get a good night's sleep. The reason why this is so important is, if you watch a lot of our retirees and all you've done, your identity has been purely, I am a firefighter. It is a jarring transition when you leave, because you've lost your tribe, you've lost your purpose, you've lost all the things that made you that firefighter. But if you were a firefighter and, a landscaper, or, whatever your thing is, well, you've got that second tribe. God forbid something happens in your city, they have to cut the whole load of positions and you get fired, which is what we've seen in the past, in the crisis. You have that to fall back on. So ownership of the firefighter, I want to hit that hard. If we're going to advocate for a work week that's healthy for you, it is up to you to not take, a second fire department job, an overnight shift in the ER, a private ambulance company job, that you've used this to be with your family more. Because the way that we save a lot of these firefighter relationships is we just home more. There is nothing more heartbreaking than promising your child that you will be home, and at 7:30 that morning you get the phone call and you have to call them back and say, Daddy, Daddy can't come home. I'm so sorry. And then by the time you get home, you're so damn exhausted. You got a few hours and then off to bed and back to the station. So this time at home is so important, and that overtime was never promised to you. It will always be there, but it was supposed to be occasional. When we have a hurricane blow through Florida, it is all hands. We kiss our loved ones and we go towards the storm. It's part of the job. But that should not be a year in, year out staffing procedure. It's not fair, because the only people that pay for that are the firefighters themselves, the people that do the scheduling. 5 p.m., see ya. So it's so unfair. All right. So I'll just touch on, I think I've already done. I'm going to skip. I got Chance, the collective host, amazing podcast. He's running the tech here. So we're going to skip to, what did Gainesville, Pasco County, and Boynton Beach see? So two of these departments have recently gone. Pasco County is going to it in 2026. But even that, advertising that they are going to this schedule, they are seeing a massive increase in recruitment. Morale has already gone up. I mean, everything that we've talked about is not working, is starting to work. Now, here's what's exciting is the city of Gainesville is actually having, I forget which school it is. I think it's, I don't want to Florida State. I think it's Florida State are actually studying them. I hope they got baseline pre, and then they're going to be studying them. So we will finally have some data. Not that you need to wait for the data, because again, we all know what it's going to show. It's going to be better. But everything that we're worried about is starting to turn around. And if we fix this work week, initially recruits are going to be, going for the better department and not testing for the one that hasn't changed yet. As we go on now, and there's this progressive move towards the shift, more and more people are going to start filing back into this profession. Because think how many people have their certificate. They just chose not to become a firefighter. We can attract them. We can stop the people that are thinking of retiring early leaving if they, if it suits them. So then there were so many firefighters. So there's never going to be like, oh, we're not going to have enough firefighters. We used to have so many that we would have to wait years to get that spot. That's where we need to get back to. Choose that top 25%. All right. So as I said, with the financial savings, we got the wage increases, reduced insurance premiums, that obviously benefits everyone. I forget who it was, but I was talking to someone the other day, and I think it was Rob Milano, and they're self-insured. So if you get your workforce healthier, you can actually have your own insurance, depending on the size of the city, of course, or county. So that being said, I want to give you some more resources. Chief Hugh Bruder, chief of Boynton Beach Fire Department, they went to 2472, originally from 2448, 18 months ago. Amazing. Hugh has been in the fire service, Miami-Dade, through the ranks. He ended up working as a city manager for a bit, and he's the Boynton fire chief now. His brother has also been in the mental health space the whole time. So amazing, amazing episode, 854. If you haven't heard that one, listen to that one. Dixon Phillips, one of the union leaders in Pasco County, episode 879. Again, this is a much bigger county, and they're having to roll it out a little slower, but they're rolling it out. They just took it upon themselves and said, we're doing this. And just so you know, this is why I'm doing this. I fielded so many phone calls, so many texts, so many emails all over the country, from the West Coast all the way through to the East Coast. So this is the revolution has started. This is happening, and it's so exciting to see. What I got to point out, though, is if you're a thought leader and you want to be progressive, and as Hugh talks about, you want to create a destination department where people are vying to go for, this is your sign. Now is when you need to do it. Where I live, we have the Florida State Fire College, an amazing college, and it's in Marion County. Now, we have City of Gainesville, fire instructors. We have Marion County, we have Ocala, and then some other ones. But you think about this, those young recruits that are going through the school, just a few miles from where I'm sitting, they're going through the pipeline. We've got one department here that's got 2472. I think Ocala, correct me if I'm wrong, has a Kelly, and then Marion 56, no Kelly, frequent mandatory overtime. Of those three, if you're a young recruit, which one are you testing for? So the people that protect my family, because I'm in the city of Ocala and Marion County are the paramedics, the transport medics. The people that protect my county are the ones that are going to be getting the rest of the candidates. But Gainesville, where I do jiu-jitsu, they're getting, they're getting to choose the best of the best for their department. So as I said, you can be at the helm as a progressive leader, or you can be going down with the ship. And I hope to God Marion County changes, because this blue sky study was done for them. I will read you just quickly put my old man glasses on a sec. This was the first takeaway from all these great minds. Explore how work scheduling can be improved with interconnected goals of improving firefighter resilience and health, improving recruiting and retention, and reducing mandatory overtime. Several presenters suggested exploring options for adding more time between shifts. In particular, there was an extensive discussion of possibly moving to a 24/72 schedule. So, number one, that was their takeaway. So the city where I live, that these business people put a lot of money with one of the greatest human performance research organizations on the planet, haven't made this change yet. I'm just going to say that very politically correctly. And I hope they do, because I have a vested interest, because it's my family that they're protecting. So do you want to be the destination department, or do you want to be the one that's left with all the recruits that no one wants? You know what I mean? It's that simple. If we move as an entire profession, we inspire a generation of young firefighter recruits, and then we go back to hundreds of people testing for a handful of jobs, which is not a fairy tale. It's literally the fire service 10, 15 years ago. All right. Another, I think, extremely valid point is when you give more rest and recovery, we can then put the hiring standards back where they should be. I'm a raise that bar kind of a guy. City of Anaheim put that bar up. Every class lost 25% of their probies through attrition. And they were like, okay, thanks. There's other departments that will take you. It's nothing personal, but this is our bar. We're not moving our bar. And I know from my probation, it was 365 days of terror, thinking you're going to lose your job, and then you get to the other side and you try not to be a YAD, year and a day. But they had incredible firefighters, incredible engineers, incredible captains, BCs, because the bar then stays. It's intrinsic. It's a culture. And this is what's funny with the fire service. I hear a lot of people saying, the leather helmet is history. The leather helmet is tradition, and it's not. It's history. Tradition is selflessness and courage and camaraderie and service. Those are the traditions of the fire service. And what's interesting is we've got courage making entry to a burning building, but we need to find that same courage to advocate for our people. Because if you're, after especially hearing this and seeing this, gamut of research and these incredible minds that I'm presenting to you, still refusing to acknowledge the change, then to be completely blunt, don't show up to the funerals anymore because you refuse to be part of the solution. It's that simple. We are at that point now where the evidence is irrefutable. The sleep medicine world, the musculoskeletal injuries, all the things. We don't die of one thing, we die of everything. So amongst all the other elements, the sleep deprivation breaks us down, and whatever the weakest link is, a blood vessel in our mind, a disc in our back, a valve in our heart, whatever the thing is, that's what kills us. So this is the time for courageous leadership. And if you don't want to be a courageous leader, then have the humility to step aside and let someone else take the helm. So that's kind of the closing thing. I didn't see any questions pop up. I've seen no chance if you've got any for me. I've just been monologuing.
I got a number. No worries. I got a number here. I have a number.
Yeah. So before I go to the very, very end, then I'll do some questions now, as I promised. Otherwise, it was just an A, no Q.
Bam.
All right. How do you argue the department says 30% less is 30% pay? So here's, someone said like kind of the opposite. So I'm glad that you asked this. I've got a friend in the Northeast who's surrounded by departments that work 42-hour work weeks, and they are on a 56-hour work week. So I'm going to flip that around. Bearing in mind, how do you justify that a person in admin works 40 and you work 56, not sleeping? That you can't justify that. But what he said is basically what the department is saying to the 56-hour people when the 42s are a thing. And in the fire service as a general, the Northeast, Boston, and everyone around there, they work 42, 24/72s, and that's normal, which is probably why this conversation is maddening to them. I don't understand what he's talking about. We already do it. A 56-hour department, you're telling your people that they are worth 33.3% less than the fire departments that work a 42-hour work week. So I would flip that around. Why are you expected to work 56 when arguably the fathers of the fire service, the cities in the Northeast, work a 42? So until you can explain to me, council member, whatever, why you need to go home at 5 p.m., but you say that I should do 2 more civilian shifts per week than you, who doesn't save lives, doesn't push meds, doesn't cut people out of cars, then your argument is invalid. So the pay is the salary. It's the hours that we've got wrong for so long. And if you want to actually save money and fix this crisis, here's your opportunity. If you want to keep bleeding and, like I said, be at the helm of a fire department that sinks, keep doing what you're doing. But like I said, don't show up at the funerals.
I got another one here from Josh Durham. How do I look at our current K days, vacation day accrual, vacation day usage, personal days, etc., and translate those things into manning available for a 4th shift?
So again, yeah, with the, from what I understand, and I worked Kelly Day, I had Kelly days in a couple of departments, and then 10 years of 56-hour weeks, no Kellys and frequent mandatories. But from what I understand, if you have a Kelly day, obviously, if James is supposed to be there on this A shift on the Tuesday, every Tuesday, and I'm not, now you're filling that spot. So, you've got to look at it as this is the overtime that is filling these K days, so you're giving the K days away. And I forget the actual math, but if you have Kelly days, obviously they go away, but you end up with a lot more days off. So if you're fighting that, you're cutting off your nose to spite your face. The vacation day accrual, Orange County, where I worked, I forget what I had. I had like 16 vacation days a year or something like that. And I was only there 5 years. Funny enough, I earned less when I left than when I got hired. There we go. But so, if someone said to me, hey, we're going to go to 24/72, but James, we're going to have to give away 4 of your vacation days in lieu of whatever it is, 30 days more a year, then I'm not a math genius, but that works for me. But that being said, when it comes to specifics like that, I'm not the expert. I'm literally, the conduit between the real experts and you guys. So what I would do, Chief Hugh Bruder is, always open to conversation. He went from 24/48, they were Kelly's intermittently, and then they went to 24/72. So I'd reach out to Hugh. I think he's ultimately going to be speaking. I remember, let me look it up. The Florida Fire Chiefs Conference. I don't normally ever speak, but I'm chairing a Q&A. And we have Pasco, we have Hugh, we have Dixon, and then we've got one of the Gainesville Chiefs coming on as well. So we'll have the 3 departments that have recently gone or about to go, and then we have one of the firefighter health scientists coming on as well. So that will be it's the 7th, 8th, 9th in Orlando. So if you're around there, you actually get to physically ask these people yourself. All right, so that would be the answer to that.
Next one I got here is what was your biggest selling point to City Council? How did you get them on board?
It's this, isn't it? I mean, here's what's sad. I think I said this on a quick short video when I was promoting this. When I left my last department, I gave up my pension to start the Behind the Shield. So I basically cashed out, gave myself a salary for a year and a half to do this full on. And because for me, burying my friends was enough in itself. And this is what I've said before. I struggle to understand why a chief or a union leader wouldn't be scouring the edges of the earth to find solutions after burying their men and their women. It is enough to move me. That's it. That's all you have to say is people are dying. Like I work, for free. I have sponsors, not been a great financial year, not making as much as I gave up, but it's not about that. It's about this. It's about less, last calls and less bagpipes, less, helmets being handed to brokenhearted children. But that being said, not all the people have the same servant's heart that we do. And so it boils down to money. So if you, again, go to your city or your county and you ask them to forensically analyze how much you spend on overtime at the moment, what is your recruitment and retention? What are your workman's comp fees? And then if they're able to kind of, are there any fire-related lawsuits? And can you just tell me how much, the settlement was? That's going to show you how much money is, because it's, there's 2 trays in and out, So this is the thing. I mean, I like to compare this to nationally. I come from a country that had the national health, which when it was first put in place, I would argue is the best healthcare system in the world. The reason I say that is if it's done properly, it costs the taxpayer very little. And the focus is making the country as healthy as possible, that they only need to really use it in car accidents and childbirth and taking care of the elderly and special needs and, the occasional A&E visit. But what's happening in my beloved country is they're getting fatter and sicker, and my beautiful healthcare system is falling apart because it wasn't designed to be used, and it's kind of partly privatized and picked apart, and to the point where it's bleeding. So the healthier the department, the less money you cost. The healthier a nation, the less money we cost. So we don't ask, the focus is not to ask for more money, it's just to show them, look, you'd show me the figures, here's the money. We just need to do this recruiting one time, with these new people, and you're going to keep saving year after year after year, and you're going to look like a rock star. And you can say it was your idea, massage the ego if you have to, but the reality is that it's the money that's really going to talk. And I think sadly that's the case with most cities and counties. But that's a beautiful thing. It will work. The money, there are money savings there, so you don't have to cook the books. You just have to do good forensic accounting, ask for the right numbers, and say, look, if we proactively fix this, more rest and recovery, let me show you Gainesville. Let me, talk to their chief and find out what happened to them. And then you're off to the races.
We got another one here from Matt Chan. James, thank you for putting this together and presenting your information. It should be obvious that moving from a 56-hour schedule to a 42-hour schedule will result in improvements in department spending. But do you have a data set for department that made the move? Workers' compensation claims, firefighter retention, application numbers, sick time use, etc.
So firstly, hey, Matt, he's been on my show. I think we came on twice now, Matt. So when people say that as far as the data, like I said before, really you need to go to your own department. Now you can absolutely kind of find out, all right, South Metro, wherever you are, what would be an appropriate size. So for you, I would assume city of Gainesville would probably be a good one. So again, contacting Matt and Brian and some of the leaders there would be a great way of finding out, okay, what did you see? What were the savings? But they're somewhat new to this. So the problem is the data is going to take a while to accrue. So if you go back to all the data we've shown on what happens with sleep deprivation and all the things, and you look at your department and go, oh, we're getting all those things. And South Metro is a very, very progressive fire department. I've had Chris Macklin on the show, and most of the things they're doing really well. The shifts, they're not there yet, but I know they're talking about it. But this is what happens. We put in a mental health counselor, and we put in the strength and conditioning coach, and that's amazing. But if you listen to any of the high level coaches, of which I've had, so many, Dan John, and, so many people that train tactical athletes, sporting athletes, they all say, if you are not sleeping, the exercise and the nutrition side is not completely wasted, but it falls by the wayside. Like the sleep is the pillar of health. So it's going back to just understanding that. But what I would say, everyone, is, again, just forensically look at your own department. You need your numbers. Like the city of Boynton Beach, Pasco's numbers aren't going to help them. Pasco County is a county, and it's a completely different animal. So I would go to your own place, say, can you show me where we're losing all this money? And then obviously, you put your common sense hat on. Okay, 42 hours a week is going to be a lot healthier than 56, more rest and recovery. And we're going to see, okay, we've got all these musculoskeletal injuries in workman's comp. Well, we know that more rest and recovery will allow people to heal. They'll have more energy. We can implement a better strength and conditioning program, get people to, lose some weight. And it's just this, this positive vicious circle. So as far as data, Matt, I don't know if you caught earlier in the conversation, but what I was saying is, if you listen to the research in the fire service, the researchers, they haven't done any studies at all on this. So this is why we're behind the 8 ball. And this is why people ask me to see data, because I know you've tried and you can't find it because it doesn't exist. So we have to go to the military and these other places. But now we have some fire departments that are starting to go. They would be your absolute best resource. And like I said, I know all of them. They're extremely excited about doing this for their own fire departments. And every single one of them I've spoken to is more than happy to help other departments get there too. So what I would say is, Chief Bruder, Dixon Phillips, Matt Harrison, Brian O'Connell, any of those guys, reach out to them, ask them, where they kind of saw the savings, but most importantly, then turn the mirror around, look at your own department, so you can say, these are our numbers, because that's what's going to sell it. If you say, oh, this department did this and this was their numbers, you're not digging into your own department. But if you can show that you're spending, for example, $3 million on overtime filling vacancies because of recruitment crisis and lack of retention, right there and then you're talking about numbers that catch people's eyes.
I got another one here from Michelle Harris. James, thanks again for taking the time to explain this. Could this type of shift improve the lives of nurses and allied health professionals? Thank you.
Two things. Firstly, in a second, I'm going to talk about 911 telehealth, which I think is going to help, pre-hospital and hospital. But that being said, I think digging into the world of sleep medicine, it's going to show the doctors and nurses, like I said, I mean, we all know that a lot of our physicians and nurses also struggle with a lot of these things, the suicide and the weight gain and, the heart attacks and all the things. So understanding, the sleep medicine and understanding the research through this fight that we're trying to do in the fire service absolutely has a place in the hospital setting as well. I'll give you a good example of why you need to challenge the way things were done. This is a true story. I've had many people verify it, but you hear about the residents, and the crazy hours that our junior doctors or, new physicians work in these hospitals. And the origin story of that is there was I think it was a surgeon a long time ago. I think it was like 100 years ago. And he, would be awake for hours and hours and hours and hours. And so obviously when you're a young student, you're like, well, I need to be awake with my, my physician, my teacher. Well, years later, they discovered that he was a cocaine addict. Very different time back then. You could probably, get it anywhere. So he was up for hours and hours because, he was tweaking this whole time. And this became a standard for, residents, junior doctors, depending on which country you're in, for a long, long time. It's only recently they finally started unpacking and going, wait a second, we shouldn't be working 60, 70 hours a week for physicians that are making life or death, decisions in an ER or in an operating theater. So absolutely, this whole sleep conversation, if I'm going to want, an ER nurse to be awake from 8 a.m. to 8, from 8 p.m. to 8 a.m., then do I need to put more rest and recovery in their shift? If the corporate world has gone down to a 32-hour work week, why shouldn't that apply to our law enforcement, our nurses, our corrections officers, and all the other people that can't do a 24? They have to do 12s or 10s and 14s.
I got another one here from Bananas, actually. This is great information, James. Thank you. I work in Northeast Florida, 400-ish member department, 2448. We are trying to get Kelly days currently. We are having a hard time selling it to the member because they are concerned of losing money. We are also trying to sell it to commissioners. Any resources that you already have that would help us present it?
Well, what's bananas is this is the resource. As I mentioned, that there's some resources that I've mentioned in this resource, so you can go down an immense rabbit hole. And I always tell people, if you're looking for even more, you've listened to the 10 episodes on sleep deprivation that I mentioned today from all the branches of the military and sports, I can give you another 30. So the biggest thing is firstly, watch this from beginning. For everyone that's not aware, I'm recording this, so I am going to post this as Tuesday's podcast, and it will be in video format on YouTube as well. So I'm going to share it. I don't know if it's too long for the socials, but it will be on YouTube. But this is the resource. Hopefully this is something that now will be a living document that you can just say to your membership, hey, we're emailing you this, however long it's been. I can't see a clock. An hour and a half conversation, or not even conversation, this English guy yapping. But everything that you are like, oh yeah, but there's a solution to that. And again, as someone pointed out, anyone can go on a podcast. I'm merely telling you what the experts are saying, and I'm giving you all the resources that you can dive into their work. And these are the people that literally deal with this for the military and the psychology and all these other worlds. So the answer is make them listen to this, put it around and say, look, this will appease your fears. Like for the wages, that it's all urban legends. When you unpack it, we've literally been just making stuff up as we went along. So will the money change? No. Like I said, your overtime rate will actually go up, and hopefully the mandatory overtime will go away. And we are literally going to revolutionize the fire service, because if we had people lining up to do this job and we took the top 25, 30%, only 10, 15 years ago, certainly 20 years ago when I joined the fire service, there's no reason why we can't get back there again. But this is a very smart generation. Until we fix the things that are broken, they're not going to test for us. So if they want to stop working mandatory overtime, if they want to have more time with their loved ones, take 90 minutes, put this in, during a commute. There'll be an audio only version when I put this out on Tuesday, and just allow yourself to drop your guard, listen to the solutions, and realize that this is just going to be a solution for so much. And we're never going to save everyone, but we're going to make an immense dent into the the mental and physical health crisis that we're in. Because I don't know about you, but I'm so tired of burying my friends.
I got another one here from Randy Monahan. How many employees would you need to hire to go from 2448 to 2472?
So again, it depends on the dynamic. Some people overhire a little bit to cover, because this is what we haven't talked about. We talk about Kelly days. Well, obviously you've got sick days, you've got vacation days, you've got, workman's comp, you've got all these holes. So this is why I say every department needs to do their own forensic look. Look at the holes, the staffing holes. Who is filling those holes at the moment? That time and a half would go away if you had an actual full-time employee there. But some have Kelly, some don't Kelly. So, as I mentioned earlier, some have a lot more vacation days than others. So that's then a negotiation tool. If I'm going to gain 30 extra days a year off, and I give away 4 vacation days, I'm still winning immensely. So, but it's literally department to department. So the answer is, Randy, how many would you need? So I would do ask for the forensic accounting on, what are we spending on overtime? What are we losing on recruits that leave our department, if that's the case? Are we offering, people are offering bonuses now, like sign-on bonuses. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the conversation, I tested against 1,000 people for 30 spots, and now we're giving sign-on bonuses trying to attract people. So that would go away. You know what I mean? So there's a huge amount of money. But again, if you missed part of this conversation, when this goes out as a recording, listen to it from the beginning, and I promise your questions will be answered.
I got another one here from Matt Chan. The part that I would like to hear is, how does the department increase their labor budget and all benefits by around 25% in order to add another shift? What are the options and how did they pull it off?
So as I mentioned before, I haven't had a department yet that did it, that said they needed an entire shift. This is the kind of misnomer as well. Like I said, you've either got Kelly days, you've got, upstaffing if you've got extra people, but it's a department by department. But what you're really doing is, again, you have to do the accounting first. You have to show them this is where the money is. The overtime, the retention, the wasted recruitment costs on people that leave your department, the workman's comp claims, the lawsuits from exhausted firefighters. Figure out where that money is and show the department there is the money. Now this budget year, you've already wasted this money. Our people are already broken. We're understaffed. The money's already there. So this budget year, yes, you are going to have to put your big boy pants on, ask for, a little bit more of a budget, but educating the people that you're asking it from. I'm obviously talking from a city and county manager point of view now. This is just to get the staffing here. And all these costs are going to reduce dramatically. And again, I would use other departments as a resource. How did they do it? I didn't do it. I'm James Gearing sitting in my dining room in my house, but I've heard, so many people that have now. And then more and more, I keep getting messages and people saying they've just gone to it as an EMS agency. They're small, but they just had the largest hiring class they've ever had in their history after they went to 24/72. So use the resources of the people that have already gone to it in the episodes that I talked about. But every single one of you need to go to your department and ask how much you're spending on all these things that I mentioned. That's where your budget is. It's just downstream. So once they can see this is going to be the savings, it's not going to be all of it, of course, but a massive dent. That's how you make the sell. But yes, of course, you're going to have to come up with a little bit of money short term. But if you got to build a new school in your town, they're going to have to put money up. You know what I mean? That's what cities and counties have to do sometimes.
Got another one here. Michaela Nicole Moskov. How do you begin to adequately filter quality candidates from the local jurisdiction when a 24/72 schedule change is announced and the floodgates of candidates open?
Great question. Put that bar back up where it's supposed to be. Now there's a double-edged sword. We miss a lot of great candidates because they're in, a part of town that maybe they don't have the money to put themselves through fire academy, as I was saying earlier. So mentorship programs are phenomenal. Chris Hickman, the Ocala Marion mentorship program, absolutely amazing. So you go into your city, figure out where it is underserved, whether it's, race or whatever, orientation, whatever the thing is, and then challenge those young people to rise up and be excited about being a firefighter. And then you pick the ones that can actually reach that bar. But then obviously the ones that are already certified, they're already, eligible, and just put your bar up high. If you've got 1,000 people, Anaheim did that. And then, they literally would lose 25% of every class through attrition, and it was terrifying being a probie for a year, but you forged, I wouldn't say excellence is the wrong word because you're not excellent after a year, but you forged the philosophy of pursuing excellence as a firefighter. And that was the entire kind of vibe. I'm the real word I'm escaping, but yeah. So if you have a lot of people, that's beautiful. Now you just get to put that bar up high. So, have a solid written, have a solid physical. If you do the CPAT, you don't have to have 1020. You can ask your candidates to get to, 920. You know what I mean? So making it fair, mentoring people that maybe aren't being accessed normally, that have barriers to entry, and bringing them in as well. But yeah, I mean, how exciting to have a load of people wanting to work for you. You get to choose the best.
I got one from Chuck DeSmith. He says, what can a fire chief do today to move towards the right work schedule mid-contract?
That's a great question. Chuck was on the show. Absolute must listen as well. A phenomenal leader in the fire service. I just had that conversation because I think Ocala are kind of mid-contract at the moment. So honestly, I think it's education, it's storytelling. Like I said, we've told ourselves a lot of fairy tales. If you were here at the beginning, we had I work one day on, 2 days off, and we work 3 8-hour days crammed together, one day off. So debunking these myths. I'm going to use this prop because I had it ready and I forgot to use it. There is a massive push at the moment for the 48-96. If you caught any of the sleep deprivation conversation, you would understand immediately why that's a horrible way to go. But I wanted to illustrate. I literally paid $20 so I could buy these for this this demonstration. The 56-hour work week, 24-48, 48-96. The Berkeley schedule. I worked in California. Everyone spins the cube, but no one asks, why is the cube so big? That is your 56-hour work week. That is your 42. So this is the thing. We've got to stop telling ourselves fairy tales, stop arguing about shift patterns that literally fix nothing, and actually fight for the one that's actually going to make a massive difference. So mid contract, I think it's just educating everyone from the firefighter through to the county and city. So when the contract comes around, you're not even negotiating. It's a shoo-in because everyone understands by that point. So this is the thing. I mean, would it going through tomorrow be ideal? Absolutely, because that means that tomorrow night people get to be in their bed an extra night every shift cycle. But next best thing is getting everything ready. So by the time you hit that contract negotiation, everyone from the firefighter to the general public understand why you're doing it.
I got one from Josh Kamen. How do you handle the pay periods? Do all 4 shifts have the same pay period, or does each shift have their own period end?
I worked 3 shifts and we always had the same pay period. So again, I'm not an expert. I'm not a financial guru. But actually, this is completely different tangent. But while we're on other solutions, another thing that Sarah Jenke talked about in the research, what I think is genius, is also when do we have shift change? So the conversation first should be the work week. So let's say hypothetically you're making, so like Chuck, you're talking about mid-contract. All right, we want to go to 24-72. We're all in agreement. But the other thing is I've always come in at like 7:30 my whole career. I've always lived, because this is normally the case with a lot of us, you can't afford to live where you work. So you live quite a long way away. So, it was usually like a 70-mile commute, hour 15, hour and a half. And so I'm getting up at, 5 a.m. Well, the night before the shift is often when we get the worst sleep. So what I love as well, and this is, again, I can't speak from experience, I've never done this, but coming in at midday. So imagine this, you're already doing a 24-72, but in this contract agreement, you've also said we're going to have shift change at midday. The reason I say that, now I wake up, I actually have breakfast with my son, I get him off to school, then I get in my car, I've missed rush hour. Now I get to change shifts. The person that I relieve is also not in rush hour. They get to go home. They're in home, in time for dinner. Flip that round on its back. The person who's on shift got their rear end handed to them all night, and we don't have to wake them up at 7 o'clock. That blew my mind. In most of the departments, they would wake everyone up. Anaheim was great. They would let us sleep, and we would just take our, partner's gear off, and we put our gear on. And when they woke up, if there's anything pertinent they haven't written on the board, then they could tell us. But to allow someone to sleep in if they've had a rough shift, and then to allow the person who's oncoming to not get there till midday, I think that's genius as well. I think that would be another game changer, because the night before shift, you would actually have a good night's sleep too. As far as the pay periods, I don't think it would change. But again, I would contact Hugh Bruder, but I wanted to throw that in. I think that's another genius solution.
I got one from Ross Chavez. It says, why isn't the IAFF leading this charge? Why isn't it on national and local news? When do the unions pull the wool away from the eyes of the council members and taxpayers?
Yeah, I agree. I've been doing this, and there's been a change of guard. And I'm hoping that this is now something that they're addressing. But let's just talk about when I was on, and I transitioned out 5 years ago. I agree 100%. To what I understood, and I paid my dues my whole career. What I understood is working conditions was the number one thing when it came to unions. And if you look at the trucking union, the shipping union, the pilots union, I mean, all those, they have all this time. You can't fly. You need this amount of rest. So the work week was very important. And I just don't understand why it hasn't, especially, and here's what was interesting. I actually was just Googling it because I was, this is constantly in my mind. Fairfax, Virginia, where a lot of our guys from the IAFF were when I was in as a firefighter, the leadership, IAFF leadership, they still work 56 hours to this day. So they didn't even have that conversation with their own department, even though the Northeast was predominantly 24/72. So if someone has a great answer, if someone's progressive in the IFF leadership, that they want to lead this charge nationally, because I think it should be an industry standard. And as I said at the very beginning, of course there will be quiet fire departments or fire stations where people already aren't doing a lot, but they're still away from their family. Like I went around the world with a group of Navy SEALs and triathletes called 7X about 18 months ago. And so I got to I literally live on a plane I think we were on the plane for 9 days while we went around the world, and these guys ran marathons on every continent. And so you saw what crew rest looks like. Now that crew was sleeping on that plane, but they weren't having their hours docked where they were sleeping. They weren't telling them to busy work and go check hydrants and all that stuff. They have to be asleep. That's, stipulation. So if all these other industries are okay with their people having rest and recovery, why isn't there this massive outcry when it comes to the fire service, especially when we have the immense physical and mental health crisis? So I'm not, new leadership, new people now. I know it's more Boston focused. I really hope this becomes a massive conversation. I haven't heard anything. I've been doing this for 8 years from any of the the letter organizations in the fire service, even though, like I said, I paid my dues for a long time. But what an opportunity to change now. If you haven't yet, let's start the conversation. So I hope they do.
I got 2 more. One, Ryan McKay. Do you have a repository of the organizations that are currently and or are considering the change so that interested departments can reach out to them for the best practices and lessons learned?
Absolutely. I did talk about it earlier, Ryan, but I will just quickly go over it again. Chief Hugh Bruder, City of Boynton Beach, went to it 18 months ago. You can listen to him on episode 854. Dixon Phillips, one of the union leadership in Pasco County, Florida, episode 879. Matt Harrison and Brian O'Connell from the city of Gainesville that just went to it Monday, episode 942. So you'll find all their kind of contact information there. And then Dixon, Pasco County are actually transitioning fully in 2026. So it's another interesting one. You got small, mid, and large department. You've got some that have been doing it for a while, one that just went, and one that's going to it. So it's a pretty, comprehensive perspective of how to and the hurdles. So, but I'm relaying a lot of the solutions that they gave in this Q&A to make it in one compact video session.
Last one, Randy Monahan. When, as you previously mentioned, you asked the city, why should we have to work 56-hour work weeks and push drugs and deal with all these people in distress, etc., while every other city employee only has to work 40 hours? But then the city responds, well, that is what you signed up for as a firefighter and choose to do. How do you respond to that rebuttal from City Commission?
Well, here's the thing. I mean, firstly, what we signed up for, because in Fire Academy, you became, let me put it this way, you became a firefighter in Fire Academy. They never talked about your work week. So what you signed up for was to be a firefighter and an EMT or a paramedic. And I adore this profession, which is why 6 years later, I'm still fighting for it. But that's not what you signed up for. That's the working conditions. And as I touched on earlier, we used to send children up chimneys and having them work in factories. Well, it's what we've always done. It's what you signed up for. It doesn't mean that it's right. And you can't justify working 40 hours and then pointing someone and say, well, that's what you signed up for. But then again, the biggest thing, if they have no heart, and I hope people out there do, but let's just say they're unable to access it, is the financial savings. Well, the way that you're doing it now is literally destroying the fire department, and we can barely recruit anyone. And you will be known as the commissioner who was at the helm, who fought this and resisted it, and you'll be known as the one who was there when the ship sank. Or you can progressively actually invest in your people, fix this, and you'll be known as one of the people that made this a destination fire department, that made the city safer for its residents. You can be the hero. But, it's what you signed up for is not, because I could take my firefighter certification and go to Boca Raton or the city of Boynton Beach, and I signed up for a 42-hour work week. It just so happens that yours was a 56. That's not what you signed up for. And if you show them that there's, many, many fire departments that work 42, and then you relay these other ones and tell them that there is a revolution, and if the departments around you go to it and you don't, you won't be able to hire anyone. Maybe, that'll be enough. But I mean, sadly, let's be honest as well, there are some people in these positions that just don't care. I got mine. So you got to find everyone else and create that groundswell. But you're getting to the point of heartlessness now if that's their only response, because there's no sense behind it whatsoever.
That's the last question we got. We've got a lot of other comments of just thanks and really appreciation just in general. So if you want to carry on, good to go.
Yeah, I'm just going to wrap it up. So 2 things. If you want to learn more, this isn't a sales pitch, but I did write a book 4 years ago called One More Light: Life, Death, and Humanity Through the Eyes of a Firefighter. The only reason I say that, it's not a biography. We'll underline this again. I am you. I am a regular firefighter. I wasn't at any big event. I didn't do anything heroic. Just did what we all did. But what I did is took a bunch of my stories from my life and career in each chapter as like a short story, but then as a takeaway, and explains sleep deprivation, mental health, suicide, injuries, the obesity crisis. So it's just, well, I don't understand. It's another layer. If people read, give them that book and say, this is what we do. This is what it actually looks like to be a firefighter paramedic in America. So that's a resource for you. The podcast Behind the Shield is completely free. You have to pay for the book because they have to print it. But it's very, very cheap on Amazon. But yeah, the podcast is almost 1,000 episodes now, Behind the Shield. I want to touch on one thing before I let you guys go that I think is extremely exciting. I'm just going to sow a little seed. I'm not going to tell you the whole thing. I have just discovered an incredible national resource that is doing amazing things, integrating telehealth into the 911 system. And this is not the community paramedic. This is literally, you call 911. If it's obviously through the EMD, you realize it's a somewhat non-emergent call, you then get the option to do a video conference with the ER physician or a nurse practitioner. They can write prescriptions. They can set up urgent care clinic appointments. They can set up Ubers and Lyfts to get you to and from. And so all the calls that they should never have called us in the first place, there's another incredible resource that I'm bringing to you that is going to address that as well. So imagine if we could get the work week where it needs to be, eliminate some of the calls that, let's be honest, it's benefiting everyone. What's going to happen is the person's going to get a lot smaller bill because they're not going to enter an ER. An ER bed is going to stay open for someone who's really ill, and you guys won't even get called. That won't even become a 911 for you. You won't get toned out. So it's a win-win-win. So if you can address the work week and eliminate some of these calls and be available for that stroke, that horrendous accident, that structure fire, which we should be doing, is, again, that's what we signed up for, not running as I had, my dentures, I don't like the taste of them. That's not a 911 call. So if we can do it both sides, man, oh my God, we make such an impact. And then we could set that bar high. People have time to work out, to train, to eat together, to spend more time, talking around the kitchen table, offloading some of the trauma. It would be incredible. So just keep your eye on that. The telehealth conversation, I'll be announcing that. So that is the next thing. But I'm going to wrap this up. I've been talking a lot longer than I thought I could even possibly do it. But I hope it's brought solutions to most of the questions. Use this as a resource. Like I said, once this is recorded, I'll be putting it out on Tuesday, and then it will be out for you to share completely for free. Give it to whoever you want. And then feel free, obviously, to message me. But I would honestly recommend the departments that have already gone or about to go. They're the SMEs. They're the ones that, but if you find out the bleeding side financially of your department, that is your ammunition for this. The science and the empathy and the compassion side and saving firefighter lives, that should move your people. The financial savings should move your cities and counties, and together you should have everything you need to make this happen. So thank you so much. I hope this helps, and signing out.